we're only 39 and 40. So we didn't know how that was possible because I'm 25 years in the business. Jackie is a senior partner for Aramosa Physiotherapy Association. She has 10 clinics across 7 cities surrounding Guelph. 2 years ago, she opened a unique women's health center, Guelph Women's Health Associates. It houses multiple experts. So I'll just let Jackie talk to you a little bit. Thank you.
That was a big lead up. So I'm going to put my timer on because anyone that knows me knows that I like to talk. So it's going to buzz in my pocket when I've reached my time limit. So thanks for having me. I am also totally drawn to these events. I love being at events that support women, and I'm not 35, so I feel like as I'm getting older, these events mean a lot more to me. But I'm here to try and talk a little bit about achieving wellness in women. And when I'm practicing, the person that I compete with the most is Dr. Google. So I thought, I'm going to see what Dr. Google says about what matters to women. And this is some of the lists that Dr. Google came up with. And I think for the most part, that actually is a pretty good list, although health technology for women, didn't really know what that meant. If we just hit the slide, because those that were brave enough to come into the corner, I am a physiotherapist, but I do have a special interest in pelvic physiotherapy. We'll get there. Pelvic physiotherapy is going to expand on those gynecological and pregnancy issues to include things like incontinence. So, if you're afraid to do this Zumba class later, you need to see us. Pelvic pain, prolapse. But also physiotherapists have unique roles in pregnancy and helping women with mastitis and lactation issues. And many women don't realize that those resources are available. And I would also add osteoporosis to the list. Don't advance the slide yet, hold on. So we live in this incredible world of we need answers, and you send your text message and you wait to see if it's read and the bubbles are coming back and you're waiting for their response. And I think we want that sort of solution for that long list of problems. So the ideal thing is that we actually have one answer that could target multiple diseases. And now we'll advance to the next slide. And guess what? We have that answer. The science is overwhelming that that answer is out there. And it is exercise, and thankfully I'm a physiotherapist. This is my passion. It's kept me entertained for 23 years. If you haven't watched that video that Dr. Evans does called 23 and a half hours, it's on my laptop at the back, 9 minutes long, go and watch it. If you're looking for research to support exercise and you want to know how you can prevent disease, I don't think there's a disease out there that doesn't show positive effects with exercise. So why aren't we using exercise as a tool? We'll go to the next slide. Because there's lots of obstacles and people want that feedback, and they want to know that they're successful with exercise. So I am going to talk about, giving yourself some good markers. The first thing is measurement. The next thing is intensity and time. If you don't have those 3 things in line with exercise, you're not going to be successful. Next slide. Okay. So this is a scary thing to do, and it's really, really hard because the norm that we look in society isn't actually the norm. So I am going to demonstrate waist circumference measurement. All we have to do is measure around our belly button and have a peek. And I'm hoping, but not quite. So, guess what? For a woman my age, I'm supposed to be under 79 centimeters of my waist circumference. Sadly, I'm not. So what does that mean? It means I had a great summer. Lots of wine. Don't own a cottage, everyone bring treats. But the reality is we have to know where we're starting from, and we need to have some measurements. But that basic measurement has the science to show that that is the measurement for disease prevention. So take the measurement and know where you start, and we're going to talk about how to check it. So we'll go to the next slide. So intensity, what kind of exercise are you going to do? How hard are you going to do it? As a physio, I often tell people, as far as intensity, we're thinking strength. Is it a heavy weight? It's going to be low reps. If it's endurance, it's going to be a lightweight. It's going to be high reps. Or is it cardio? Are you trying to get your heart rate up? Because you know what? All of these things will actually have a different effect on your body. And depending on what your goal is,
then you may need to have more focus on one versus the other. Next slide. So we need to be able to exercise with purpose. If you're only going to the gym 3 times a week, you got to know why you're going. Are you going for waist circumference? Are you going to increase your bone mineral density? What are you going for? So we're going to start with cardio. And we'll just back up for 1 sec. So cardio, when we think about waist circumference, losing weight, we think about heart disease, we think about diabetes, we can even think about arthritis, we can think about depression, the list goes on. But we need to be working at 65 to 70% of our maximal heart rate. How do you know if you're there? Well, you can measure it, but if you're exercising, you should be able to talk, but you shouldn't be, having an easy conversation. You want to be able to talk, but you need to be working. So, next slide. I'm addicted to my Apple Watch. This is a great invention. Proof is in the pot, whether you were exercising or not. So on this slide, you can see that I had not a great day. Took 6,800 steps. People may know the magic number in the diabetic world is supposed to be 10,000 steps. The science is actually pushing us more to 12,000 steps. So on this day that I took 6,800 steps, look at my heart rate. My heart rate didn't move very much. I got a big 5 minutes of exercise. So if I actually doubled those steps, working at that same intensity, I would have got my 12,000 steps, but I would have only got 10 minutes of exercise. So even though I did 12,000 steps, 10 minutes of exercise isn't helping me at all. So we need to think about that. If you click that button, it's going to circle, that was a lousy day. Next slide. Okay, so I get asked all the time, I like yoga, I want to do yoga. Okay, yoga is good for lots of different things, but you have to decide what your goal is. If your goal is to de-stress, I love yoga. If it's flexibility, I also like yoga. In this day, again, a very slow day for me, 4,300 steps, it's kind of embarrassing. Lots of standing on my feet, so I was definitely not sitting at the desk. But I did go to power yoga, and I did end up getting 78 minutes of exercise in. So my heart rate was up there, so I did get some cardio in. So that could have been an effective day for reducing my waist circumference. But not enough steps for weight bearing. Okay, so let's think about next slide. If we're gonna exercise with purpose, and if you're one of these people that maybe have some risk factors for osteoporosis, maybe you've already been told your bone mineral density is at moderate risk, then you need to choose your tools wisely. Don't go to the gym and do yoga. We don't even know if that has an effect on bone mineral density. What we do know with absolute certainty, the science is so strong with this, that if we do weight-bearing exercise, so feet are on the ground, gravity is acting on our body, we can stimulate those bone cells to move from that porous bone to that nice bone that doesn't have as many holes in it. So we have to think about that. The other exercise we know is weight training, but there's some rules with weight training. So we're gonna go to the next slide. So weight bearing, this was one of my better days, but 16,000 steps, the only reason why I got those high steps is because I consciously did a run. So if I didn't do that run, I probably would have been in that 10,000 step range. So when I started to do this was a light bulb moment for me, because if you have a sedentary job, you drive to work, you sit at a desk all day long, and you're not making that conscious effort to do that 35-minute walk or to do that 35-minute run, you're not going to get your steps in. And while you're doing those steps, you also have to be thinking about your heart rate. But this was a good day. If I was osteoporotic, I would have got lots of weight-bearing exercises in, so that helps with my bone density. As I mentioned, we don't know the effects of yoga on bone density, and we do know that Aquafit actually probably reduces your bone density. There's no gravity in the pool. So I have a lot of clients that will say to me, I like going to the gym, but I want to do Aquafit. I'm like, okay, but if you're going to do Aquafit 3 times a week, what are you doing for your bone density? We only have so much time in the day, so we have to decide why we're exercising. And next slide. So weight training, this actually has stronger research than the weight-bearing studies. So they compared weight training against people that were taking estrogen, they were taking biphosphonates, were taking all that Fosamax, all those medications, and the people that lifted weights did better than everybody. But these weights had to be heavy. They needed to be heavy enough that you felt fatigued within 7 to 10 reps. So if you can do 3 sets of 15 of a biceps curl, that's not heavy enough to stimulate bone production. So of course we need to be progressive, and I've had really, really frail women in our programs that they get stronger. And it does take time, but we know we can make change, and we know that it will affect their bone density. So before I talk about this slide, because I actually forgot to put my most favorite slide up, and it's actually the reason why no one came to talk to me. If we're actually talking about exercising with purpose, the other reason why we want to exercise is for your pelvic floor. So otherwise known as your vagina. We can all say that word. Here it is. So what happens to our pelvic floor? We need to think about exercise for lots of different reasons for the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is our support. So if we think about when we're pregnant, the weight of that baby alone is going to stretch that pelvic floor. Regardless of whether you have a cesarean or a vaginal delivery, that pelvic floor has gone through stress. If you do have a vaginal birth, the studies show 1 child, 2 child, 3 children, your risk for things like incontinence, prolapse, pelvic pain, they go up. In fact, we know the science is so strong that some countries, like France, automatically fund pelvic floor strengthening as part of their postpartum program. Why do we not do it in North America? No one really knows. But I mean, I've been treating pelvic floor for 23 years. I'm very, very excited to say the first year I might have seen 5 pelvic floor patients in a year. I mean, now every clinic that we have has 4 to 5 pelvic therapists. It is just like going to a physio for your back, for your shoulder, for your ankle sprain. No one expects you to have a knee replacement and be able to walk without any help. So if you're gonna have a baby, you need to think about your pelvic floor. Exercise with purpose. Make sure that you're doing pelvic floor strengthening right, which is known as Kegels, but Kegels they're not well done because we need to be taught how to do them. And when you come and see us, we do an internal exam, which is so helpful because if I'm touching your pelvic floor and you tell me you do Kegels every day at the stop sign 20 times, that's common, I hear it all the time. And I'm touching your pelvic floor and I'm like, okay, show me a Kegel, and nothing happens. Sometimes they squeeze their bum. Sometimes I see their thighs. I'm like, well, that's not helpful. Because I show them the model, and I'm like, this is where your pelvic floor is. Look where your bladder is. Your thigh muscles are not going to help where your bladder is. So if we're going to exercise with purpose, we have to decide what we're trying to fix, and we need to put the time in. Because this is the problem with exercise. This is why we fail at it. Because it's not quick. It does take time. You have to be persevering, and you have to be consistent. The best body trainers in the world will exercise 3 times a week for 6 weeks before we see a single change in their muscle fiber. So we can't expect us to be any different. So you need to keep pushing yourself. Don't measure your waist every week. It's not going to change that quickly. You know, measure it at 3 weeks, measure it at 6 weeks. Give yourself some reasonable time for change. Next slide. So, I told you about Dr. Evans. I love that video. A friend of mine was just talking about this book. An old client of mine asked me to read it. The blue book was the original book, came out for men. And then they did a pink book, pink for women. I don't know why this picture is in yellow, but this is actually a really great book. It is written by a cardiologist. The chapters flip between a cardiologist and a client story. I absolutely love it. They do a great job of explaining sometimes some challenging science in normal words, but you're going to get the same message. This guy's going to tell you to go buy a heart rate monitor because you need to see if you're really exercising. And the book also talks about things around bone density and reinforces things like weight training and weight-bearing exercises. Next slide. So, are we still looking for the magic pill? Because I think I've already given it to you. It's exercise. So I am happy to answer any questions if anyone's brave enough now to talk about their pelvic floor. And if not, feel free to pick up information. We certainly are always welcome to do telephone consultations with people. A lot of people have reservations about even coming in for their first assessment because they're pretty fearful as to what's going to happen. So let us help take some of those barriers away. My goal was that every woman here was going to leave knowing what their pelvic floor was, where it was, and that we can help your pelvic floor.